the reason that hybrid is harder because you're having to consider the experiences of multiple situations and not just one homogenous type of situation, which we've all been conditioned to expect in a work environment or even an educational environment.
Welcome to Unexpected Journey, the show where each week top professionals share work wisdom and life lessons about their careers and what they have learned about human experience in the workplace. I'm your host, Ann Bibb. Today we're joined by Tammy Bjelland, the founder and CEO of Workplaceless, a training company that improves remote and hybrid team effectiveness by developing the capabilities that workers, managers, and executives need to succeed in distributed environments. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe and leave your comments below. Now let's get started. So Tammy, I am just so excited that you're here. I'm thrilled that you joined us, and I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while.
Yeah, me too. I'm very excited to be here and also to just have this conversation.
So one of the things that I'd like to kind of start out with is, what do you think is, when you first started Workplaceless, it was really focused on remote and helping remote teams succeed. But over the past 3 years, there's really been a shift towards needing to help hybrid teams be successful, especially as organizations are coming out of the pandemic and trying to make that shift and deciding where they want to go. Organizations are trying to define what hybrid is, and I think everybody's defining it differently. Mm-hmm. But where are you seeing the difference between what remote learning is and what hybrid learning is?
Yeah, so the difference between remote learning and hybrid learning is very similar to the difference between remote work and hybrid work, in that when you are coming from a place where everyone is remote or everyone is co-located, you have everyone on a level playing field. When you have everyone coming in with different experiences or different locations, you are automatically creating a difference or a disparity between the experience of those individuals. And so hybrid is harder. That's I would call it a cliche at this point, but as most cliches, it's rooted in some truth, and that is that hybrid is harder. It is difficult to manage for all of the experiences that come in a hybrid situation.
But why is hybrid harder though?
Because you do have to manage all of those different experiences. So if you know that everyone is going to be remote, everyone has at least one thing that makes them all equal, and that is that they are all working remotely. When you have a hybrid situation, some people are remote, some people come into the office sometimes, some people are in the office all the time. And so you're managing for the expectations and you're managing for the experiences of all of those people. And that's just a lot of variables. It's just so many more variables when you introduce flexibility. And that introduces challenges because it's much easier to design a learning experience or a work experience when you know exactly where and in what situation that audience is or that participant is going to be at.
Well, even when you do know, it's designing it is different, because let's think about it. There have been several situations where I've been the remote, one of either the only one or one of a couple, and there's been a whole group of people in a conference room. And that situation of just working or learning is frustrating for the people on the remote end. So a hybrid situation, and I think this, again, I'm going to go back to what is hybrid, right? Because is that hybrid a hybrid group, or is hybrid going in and out of the office? People are defining it differently.
Yeah, in that situation of a meeting, I would call that a hybrid meeting. And then hybrid work is when the day-to-day workflows are composed of people who are either in the office or working at home or a mix of all of those. And then the biggest challenge I think is, and why it's so hard, is because of our biases. So one of the most pervasive and the hardest to overcome is the idea of distance bias or proximity bias, which is the tendency to prioritize or to give greater importance to ideas or people or things that are closer to us in space or time. And as an individual person, it's really hard to overcome that bias. So all of those people that are sitting in a conference room, they're thinking about their own experience and they're contributing their own thoughts and ideas to that meeting. They have to consciously remind themselves to consider the experience of the people who are not in that room physically. And that takes work. That takes mental work. And it even takes time as well. And so the reason that hybrid is harder, because you're having to consider the experiences of multiple situations and not just one homogenous type of situation, which we've all been conditioned to expect in a work environment or even an educational environment.
So when you are thinking, when we're talking about hybrid learning, are we having conversations about educating and teaching in a hybrid fashion, or educating about management in a hybrid environment?
So hybrid learning, I would say, is about the learning and development in a hybrid environment. Hybrid training is about training for hybrid work skills.
Words matter, people.
Yeah.
Words matter, because hybrid training and hybrid learning are two different things.
Yeah. So that's how I would differentiate those things. And of course, training is part of learning and development. But when you take just those terms individually, hybrid learning, hybrid training, I would probably actually add, another word in there. I would say hybrid work training or hybrid skills training, to clarify that it's about training individual contributors and managers and executives to succeed in a hybrid work environment. Whereas hybrid learning, to me, would be like a shortened version of learning and development in a hybrid environment, which will include skills to succeed for, in a flexible work environment, but it also involves a lot of other considerations just about like the modalities and of how you disseminate information, and what percentage of learning experiences do you make in person versus virtual? Do you make those experiences blended? So it's and not all learning and development content will be about hybrid work skills. You'll also have additional skills that need to be developed that are specific to the business or specific to different functions. So those encompass very different conversations, and the people that are part of those conversations are there's a Venn diagram. Some people are very interested in both of those things, but for the most part, when you're talking about hybrid learning and development, you're talking to like L&D practitioners. Whereas when you're talking about hybrid work skills, you'll include those L&D practitioners, but also the individual contributors and managers and executives who are working in a hybrid environment also are interested in that.
What are some potential signs that somebody might have some unconscious bias?
Some signs of unconscious bias related to distance bias would be always giving the opportunities to individuals that you've just talked to, or so that would be a recency bias. Always giving opportunities to individuals who are in the office, making decisions in an impromptu way, face-to-face with individuals, or even this can, distance bias can also happen virtually. So, you're in a meeting with 10 people, and those are the only people that get to be in the decision making process, when there might have been 2 people missing from that meeting that day, and not considering taking into account their input. So distance bias can come in many shapes and colors. And so just being aware of, in this interaction, in this decision that I'm making, am I considering the experience and am I considering the input of everyone that needs to be involved, whether I can see them, in the same room or whether I can see them on Slack, making sure that you're thinking about those individuals and making sure that people are included, no matter where they're located.
Now, you mentioned the demand for flexibility, and that's something that we're seeing in a lot of situations right now, especially as employees are really driving the job market at this particular moment. Yes, we're seeing tens of thousands of jobs that have been laid off, but we're also seeing a high job market and a lot of jobs available. So it's still an employee's market. How do you manage that employee experience when employees are demanding flexibility and specific boundaries, and you balance that with business needs, especially when potentially that employee experience and the employee's demands don't necessarily go with the business needs, when those two things conflict?
Yeah, my first suggestion there would be to see whether it actually does conflict with an actual need of the business or a habit of the business, or
Ah,
or a bias.
we've always done it that way.
Exactly. So we've always done it that way, or it's too
Those
hard.
words are the bane of my existence.
Yeah. Or it's just too hard, or it takes too much time, or we would never get buy-in from XYZ. And that isn't a business need, right? That is an indicator of a business.
Can we say that again?
Business blinders. That is not a business need. That is, that is a roadblock that prevents real change from happening. And the risk for businesses that continue to respect the roadblocks is that they will lose out on top talent, and they won't be able to adapt when times become really, really hard and they need to make those changes. Companies that enable flexible work and are doing the work to invest in the skills and the infrastructure that are needed, they're going to be able to pivot at a moment's notice. When companies who are digging their heels in at changing the way that they work, they're going to be stuck when something terrible inevitably happens. I mean, we saw it with COVID. We saw that drastic shift to remote work. Change happens and bad things happen, and we need to be ready to adjust.
Can we revisit that though? Because it's not even just about bad things happening to need change. In order to continue to have good things, you need to change. Thinking about companies, there's startups happening every day. And startups get to a certain point and then they go over this hump to get to mid-market. What got you to that phase doesn't get you to enterprise.
Yeah.
You have to change how you do business, how you manage your clients, how you onboard, how you find talent, who's your talent, do you need a customer success team? Does your customer success team onboard your clients, or do you have a different team that does that? Are they your operations? I mean, how you do business from day one is not how you do business when you're a $50 million company.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to change. If you don't change, you are not going to grow.
Right. Yeah. What got you here won't get you there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that and bringing in new people in different diversity of thought will help you get there.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is, your original question about, this employee demand for flexibility versus like the business needs. I do want to say that, there and caution against like change for change's sake. Like that's not
Mm.
necessarily what I'm talking about. And I know it's not what you're talking about. But if there is a real benefit to change, and we do know that shifting to flexible work and enabling autonomous work is a way to increase employee satisfaction, retention, and also just agility. Um, if you know that there's a benefit to be had, you owe it to all the stakeholders involved to explore how that can actually happen in your organization.
Autonomous work, I'm guessing that includes something like asynchronous work.
It does, yeah. Autonomous work is enabled by an async first approach. But autonomous work is that ability to choose when you work, how you work, and it gives you ownership of the work that you do.
What is asynchronous though?
Asynchronous communication is communication that does not happen in real time. So there's an expected delay that happens between messages. Um, we use async all the time: text messages, email, old fashioned letters. I mean, we have been communicating asynchronously as long as we've been writing. Um, this is versus synchronous communication, which is real time communication like phone calls, video calls, meetings. And an async first approach is an approach that defaults to async before moving to synchronous conversation. So this sounds, kind of vague. Um, but, there are lots of elements that actually go into an async first approach. Um, uh, a commitment to documentation and writing, lots and lots of writing. And with that comes with a commitment to reading documentation. That's usually the part that
Reading and writing.
yes.
Is
But
there arithmetic as well?
there's depending on your job, there might be arithmetic. I don't know. But so writing well, writing concisely, keeping documents up to date. A lot of async is about having access to information without human beings as gatekeepers. So, being able to find the information on your own without interrupting somebody else's workflow. And that means that documentation needs to be clear, it needs to be concise, and it needs to be accessible. You need to be able to find it in the moment that you need it. And it also involves a lot of restructuring of work processes because, as I mentioned before, we've been conditioned to think of work happening in an office, and work is this free flow of conversation and ideas, and we have all of these serendipitous aha moments, and that's really how work gets done. When in reality, a lot of work happens because of it happens because we have built that structure to allow for those ideas and to allow for the work to be accomplished. And that can be done remotely. It can be done in a hybrid environment, but it takes a reframing and it takes a restructuring of processes. And that does take time and it takes trial and error. And that can be challenging for everyone involved, especially leaders. Leaders struggle. There needs to be a clear goal in mind as well. And there needs to be trust. There needs to be psychological safety. There needs to be, that space and grace for people to try new things and fail and give feedback and know that that feedback is going to be taken as it's intended. And also, knowing that that feedback is actually going to be implemented.
So if somebody's listening right now and they're like, my company needs to go async first, but they want to take it to their executives. So, but they haven't gotten on board yet. What is your recommendation for how that individual can pitch async first to their leadership team? What do they say? How do they do it?
Yeah. So number one, I would recommend learning about the benefits of async. So, people who are resistant to change are going to be more receptive to the outcomes or the benefits of changing. So, I want to go async first is just not going to get you very far, unless that individual that you're talking to, has already bought in. So some of the challenges that are fairly ubiquitous in, especially knowledge-based businesses, our burnout, too many Zoom meetings, spending too much time trying to find information, information silos. Like, these are challenges that a lot of organizations have. And as companies grow and as we continue contributing to this body of knowledge, it becomes, a business imperative to enable individuals to access all of that information in a timely way. So presenting async first as a way to alleviate or mitigate some of those challenges is a good way to start the conversation about converting to an async first approach. I would also suggest that, you very rarely are you going to see organizations, make a full-on change of everything and every way that they work. You can start with really tiny actions, and you can start with a couple of bold experiments to coincide with that. But often you're going to have a mixture of some of those things, bold experiment and then tiny actions. So there are things that can be done even if you are not a decision maker in your organization, to adopt more async first approaches. And we cover a lot of those in our Async at Work course, which is really geared toward individual contributors and leaders. So we give examples of what you can do, whether you're a decision maker or not.
I don't know if you have this data on you, but do you have like an average amount of time saved by an organization that has moved async?
Yeah, it really depends. Like, it's really hard to gather that data, and especially from a third party like us, because you have to the organization has to gather like time spent on activities before like an intervention like this or a change like this. And a lot of organizations just don't have
They
that
just don't.
information or that data. So we do have some data that shows that people who implement the concepts in the Async at Work course, that they've saved on average like 2 to 3 hours per week, which
Is
is
that
not,
per person?
yeah.
So if you're a 100-person organization,
Hmm.
then that would mean on average, you're saving 200 to 300 hours per week.
Yeah.
And if your average staff per hour rate, let's just say $10, just to make it easy.
Yeah.
I mean, that adds up.
It definitely adds up. It's not insignificant. What is hard to measure is just, what they were spending their time on before, right? Because if the organization isn't collecting that information, it's sort of hard to gather that data.
It sounds to me like if somebody's trying to pitch async to their leadership, that bottom line is something that they should at least start looking at that data
Yeah.
and try and figure out where dollars could be saved.
Yeah. And sometimes the dollars are not necessarily related to like straight time, the value of time. Sometimes it's with attrition, right? So if you have really high rates of attrition, consider making changes, whether it's an async first approach. If you discover, through an employee survey, that burnout from meetings and burnout from, too much sync communication, if that's a result of the survey, consider implementing more async practices and see if that has an impact on attrition or on employee satisfaction. I mean, there are a lot of metrics that can be looked at to see what kind of impact async has. But employee satisfaction, time saved, and time spent on deep work, that is definitely a metric that, when we work with clients, we suggest people actually, think about before implementing any change, and then also like revisiting that afterwards, because that is such a big impact on overall like productivity as well as satisfaction and just like calmness in the workplace. Just having like a stretch of time where you can focus on tasks that take up a lot of cognitive effort, can make a big difference in the satisfaction of an employee.
Absolutely. So what if somebody's listening to you and they're like, "Wow, she's so successful. She's accomplished a lot. I really want to follow in her footsteps." Like, I want to be Tammy when I grow up. What is your advice to that individual that is maybe a supervisor right now and wants to work their way up, or a director? What would you tell them?
So my advice, let's see, I would say like lots of trial and error. So I'm one of those people that I get really excited about new possibilities really easily. Now, I don't know if that's really advice. I don't know if I can like tell somebody else to be excited about new possibilities, but
Be
um,
excited, Tammy. Be
being excited.
excited.
So I think one of the things that I would suggest is, like when you're presented with a challenge or like a failure, even, it's like what can possibly come of this, and like getting excited about that aspect
You're
of.
the second person this week I've talked to that said, I get excited when I fail because that means that I'm going to learn something from it and be successful on it.
Yeah, and so it's not like definitely the learning from it, but also I'm like, oh, well, this didn't work out in this way. But like think about what could happen the next time. Especially if you are going into business on your own, I think that going into that unknown or unexpected journey, will, having that kind of outlook will be very helpful, because especially, when you're starting out and you're trying, or even not when you're starting out. I mean, I've been in business for 11 years and it's changed so much from when I started, that I just need to be okay with every day, waking up and the possibility that like the direction of my business could completely change. And, part of that is scary and frustrating. And then a lot of it is just really exciting. And then the other thing too, I have one other piece of advice, and this can be really hard, especially for people who are introverts, is business in general. Like you can only succeed based on your relationships. Like it really does come down to the connections that you make, whether it's with your customers, getting to really know the people that are buying the thing that you're selling, or your team members, your mentors, your peers, and even your competitors. Like it really comes down to having authentic connections and understanding people. And I say that that's hard as an introvert, just because sometimes it can be really tempting to just stay within yourself and just try to create things and hope that people will come. And really all of the success that I've had has come from, the relationships that I've built.
I remember a conversation that we had probably 5 or 6 years ago. And you said, I don't want to be the face of my company. And you're
I
like,
know. I know, and
you're
I
like,
still wish it. I still wish it were true, to be honest. And it is true, because I am an introvert, so I don't necessarily like. I would love to be unknown, really, but I also know that I'm not going to achieve the results that I want for the business if I do that.
and
And
I'm sitting here doing the same thing. I'm like, I'm out there. My face is I'm on the podcast. Everything has my name on it. And I'm doing the same exact thing you are. We're
yeah,
two peas in a pod. And at the same time, there's another part of me that's like, can we just go cuddle up and like Netflix for the next 48 hours?
Yeah, and I just want to put some really great content out there, but
Yes. Like, can I do the behind the scenes stuff and
yeah,
somebody else?
I
but
know. Yeah.
but at the
And it,
same time, we're also both very good at what we do.
we are. We're good at what we do, and other people benefit, I think, from seeing the humans behind the work. Um,
And we've made some great friendships along the way.
we have. Yeah. And so that's my final piece of advice is that, really focus on relationships. And I'm not saying that if you focus on relationships, everything will be easy. It won't, but you'll at least have like a network of support and also ideas and feedback. And that is really valuable.
Very valuable. There have been so many times that even bouncing ideas off. I
Mhm.
mean, I was able to test one of your betas one time. That was awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's been great. So, Tammy, if somebody wanted to reach out to you, two questions. One, why would somebody reach out to you? And two, how? How would somebody reach out to you?
I would say that I would hope that people would reach out to me if they just want to learn more or even just connect and say hi. I'm open to all sorts of connections. But if you are really interested in learning more about async first, or if you're interested about learning about hybrid skills for managers or individual contributors, you can reach me on LinkedIn. I'm at Tammy Bieland. So I'm sure
Yeah,
Anna
we'll spell that for everybody.
will spell it for everybody.
And there will be links below.
Yeah. Also, and it does roll off your tongue now. It might have
It
taken a few years,
it
but
only
you
took
say it
10 years.
beautifully. You say it beautifully. It's perfect. So yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn and I'm also on Twitter. My handle's at Tammy Bieland. So you can find me there.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tammy. It was great. I know that this is probably, I mean, we talk a lot, but this is the first time we've recorded our conversation.
No, I
So
know.
I
It's
love
been
it.
a delight.
We have it for posterity.
Yes, for always.
Thank
And
you,
forever.
everybody, for joining us. And I look forward to seeing you all again next week. As we wrap the episode up, we would like to take this time to thank you for joining us this week on Unexpected Journey. Our guest information will be linked in the episode description, along with a link to our company website, remoteevolution.com, and our host website, annbib.com. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share on your favorite podcast app and on our YouTube channel so that you never miss an episode and we can continue to bring them to you. Let us know your thoughts on what we discussed in the comment section. And once again, thank you for joining us. We hope to see you again next week for another episode of Unexpected Journey.